Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. I hope you're all having a wonderful Christmas Eve today, and considering what day it is, I've decided to show a very festive looking steam loco from Hornby. Today's locomotive is this, the Hornby Wainwright H-Class tank engine from the SECR. And I bought this thing back in 2017 when it was new, and I absolutely loved it. In fact, it fast became one of my favourite locomotives. It looked fantastic and it ran perfectly. However, this did not last long. Not very long after the review, this loco started to run badly. It began to slow to a crawl, and very soon it couldn't even turn its wheels anymore. So I assumed that there was something wrong with the motor, and I ordered a cheap replacement from China on eBay. I fitted the new motor, and great news, the loco was working properly again. But it didn't last long. After not very long, the loco slowed down to a crawl, and pretty soon it wasn't able to turn its wheels anymore. Damn. Well, I thought perhaps just the cheap Chinese motor I put in this wasn't up to the job, so I got in touch with Hornby. I explained what had happened. I said, I think it's the motor. They agreed with me, and very kindly they sent me a replacement motor. I put it into the loco and hooray, the performance was fixed again. But only for a time. Didn't last long. After not very long, the locomotive slowed down to a crawl, and pretty soon it wasn't able to turn its wheels anymore. Now, this was the third failure I'd experienced with the same locomotive. At this point, I gave up. It wasn't a favourite model of mine anymore, because now I just associated it with failure and wasted time. So this just became a very beautiful but very useless ornament on my shelves. Until 2022, because of course now I've got a 3D printer and I have the power to do something about this myself. So what I've done for today is I've 3D printed a new bracket so that I can fit a coreless motor into this loco. I'm pleased to say that does seem to have fixed the issue, and I've also bypassed all of the components on the DCC socket circuit board, just in case any of those were to blame, because you've got to think, 3 motors it's gone through, there's got to be something else the matter, hasn't there? So hopefully this loco is in a state now that I can run it. I am doing it at the end of the year so that it doesn't appear on my ranking or anything, because obviously I've modified it. This doesn't represent the loco that I bought from the manufacturer, but I still hope I will be able to revisit this loco and show it to you properly. Now, I say I bought this model 5 years ago in 2017, and that's true, but the model is still current today. In fact, Hornby have a couple of H-Class locos on their website ready for pre-order. So this is still a model that they are producing. However, when I purchased my loco, I hasten to add when it was brand new tooled, a new release, it cost me £97 from the retailers. Not too sure what the RRP was at the time, unfortunately. Now though, the RRP for this at the very least is £145.49, with the other version costing significantly more than that. But you can see that a typical retailer price is £141.74, which is an increase of 46% in cost over approximately 5 years. Now, defenders of manufacturers like Hornby would attribute this increase purely to inflation, but I say that is utter poppycock, because if we look at the inflation calculator from 2017 to the latest date in 2022, the increase in price due to inflation should have made the loco cost around £115 to £116 at the retailers, which would represent an increase of around 20%, which is still insanely massive over just 5 years, but such are the times we live in. Yet, the price increase that we've seen from Hornby is around double of what you would expect to see from inflation. So again, I say, to my mind, Hornby's price increases do seem disproportionately massive, especially when you look at the simplicity of the liveries that Hornby are now offering on their H-Class locos compared with the complexity of the livery that we see here on the pre-grouping SECR livery. But enough about that, this loco is now working, so happy Christmas Eve. Let's take a look at this, let's see what it's like. So the SECR H-Class, it seems like absolutely years since I've last looked at this, and of course it has been. But yeah, gorgeous looking thing in a very, very lovely livery. Cannot wait to look at this again because I've forgotten all about it, more or less. It has been that long. It's a very small locomotive in a very small box, which is good, I suppose, because that should mean lower shipping costs. Let me show you the end of the box. So the product code for this one is R3538. It is SECR Wainwright H-Class and it's number 308. And this is a DCC ready locomotive. And if I show you the back of the box, you can see here we have a brief history of the class in real life. If you want to pause and read that, you can do, although I will give you a bit more in just a moment. Class 1P, so not a powerful locomotive, but this design was introduced just after the turn of the 20th century, so we are talking quite old with these. Anyway, let's open up the box and let's take a look, shall we? The beautiful H-Class. That is one thing, incidentally, that I do remember about this model, the fact that it was absolutely beautiful. And of course, that's why it was all the more painful when this thing stopped working properly multiple times, because it was such a beautiful thing. So hopefully all those problems are behind this model now, and finally we should be able to enjoy it, as long as it doesn't slow down to a crawl again today, and then I think I will just cast it out of the open window, frankly. Anyway, Wainwright H-Class, operating and maintenance instructions. Let me show you inside. So, basic lubrication instructions, yeah, coupling rods, axles, fairly standard. Body removal, little bit fiddly. You do have to remove the NEM coupling adapter there. I do know this because I've opened this locomotive up many times. Accessories, yeah, shows you where some of the accessories go. Fitting DCC has an 8-pin socket in there, so that's what you need. And then on the back, a little bit about brake rods. So, yeah, fairly standard. Doesn't reveal too much about the loco and its mechanism, although I will give you the guided tour in just a bit. Okay, let's open up the sleeve then, and let's have a look. We do have an accessories pack here, and inside there is some painted brake rigging, which looks pretty good, and you've got the other accessories to go with that. A couple of NEM couplings, which are not fitted to the model as standard, although I have fitted one so that it can actually haul some stuff. And also we have some vacuum pipes, but I think that is it. There are no screw-link couplings included with this model, which is unfortunate. But let's have a look at the loco herself then, shall we? How does this open at this end? I like to do this carefully. There's all kinds of foam and stuff stuck to the inside of this clamshell, so that should help to protect the loco and its livery. Let's pull it out then. Okay, so yeah, I was right to remember this as a gorgeous model, because there's no arguing with that, is there? It really is. One of the better produced SECR liveries, I think. It's right up there with the Hatton's P-Class, really, isn't it? Except this may be even slightly better than that because of the electroplated dome, but I will talk more about the detail in just a moment. In terms of the weight, this loco is a little bit lighter than it would have been out of the factory, because during the motor surgery that this loco has undergone, I have removed the flywheel, which the model would have had from the factory. So it's a bit lighter because of that, and I'll show you more on that later on. But the running plate is made of metal, which brings the loco a quality feel and a little bit of extra weight. Apart from that though, the bodywork for the most part is just plastic, but it's got, I would say, a fair finish. It's not a massively high quality finish. We do see better finishes today on modern releases, but the livery itself is excellent, as you can see. Anyway, let's have a brief history of the H-Class, and then we'll take a much closer look at this loco. And I tell you what, I'm really looking forward to it. The H-Class originated on the Southeastern and Chatham Railway in 1904, when the first of 66 locomotives was built to the design of Harry Wainwright. The class was introduced to replace the older SECR Q-Class, which was a James Stirling 044 design, which dated back to 1881. The H-Class continued with the London suburban passenger duties that the Q-Class and also the R-Class had previously taken, though with more speed and more power than before. The H-Class ran on 2 inside cylinders. It weighed in at 55 tonnes and produced a tractive effort of around 77 kilonewtons. The boiler design on the H was so successful that it went on to be used for several other classes of locomotive. Later, most of the fleet would be fitted with push-pull equipment for branch line use, which further extended their versatility. 64 out of 66 entered into British Railways service, which in itself is a testament to their longevity, really. However, withdrawal eventually began in earnest from around 1955, but it wouldn't be complete until 1964, when the last 3 were finally removed from service. And sadly, in all, every example but one was scrapped. So there she is, up close and personal for you. Hornby's absolutely sensational looking SECR H-Class. And this model's features and level of detail are adequate enough to make this loco look absolutely amazing and detailed, while not being so crazily complex that they put the price up massively. And 5 years ago, it was this that made it possible for this loco to be sold for less than £100 at the retailers. I don't understand why the price today has gone up by almost 50%, or in fact in the case of the Southern Black version, which is much less complex than the SECR Green in terms of livery, has increased by more than 50%. Yeah, I don't understand that, but for the model that I've got here, it looks absolutely fantastic. In terms of the weight, mine comes in at 158 grams, which is less than a Hornby M7, but more than the EFE 02, although bear in mind I have made some modifications to this, which does include the removal of the flywheel, so we can add probably 6 or more grams to this, plus whatever the difference in weight is between the motor I took out and the motor I've put in, but either way, that's the approximate weight. The quality of the model is high as well. We do have the die-cast running plate, as I've already said, which has a nice finish to it. And even though the bodywork and really most of the detailing is just made of plastic, it has all been applied in a quality manner, I think, so that the loco looks realistic and the illusion is maintained really quite nicely. I think it is the livery on this example that makes the model so impressive though, so let's start by looking at that. The banding on the boiler is absolutely marvellous, as you can see. It's very complex, not at all like the railroad version of the SECR Green that we looked at not long ago on the E2. This is the fully fledged, unsimplified version of SECR Green, and it looks marvellous. The finish on the boiler, actually under the lights, isn't too bad. It's got a slight satin sheen to it. I think models that we see today from Hornby are a little bit more glossy though, I would say. The side of the tanks look superb. You've got the SE and CR lettering, which looks lovely, and you've got the little crest under there, high quality printing, of course, and lots of lining surrounding that as well. The side of the cab is fully lined, the cab doors, the cab walls, the side of the coal bunker with the running number on it, that's all very complex. It's just a massive, massive list. You've got the splashers, which are detailed with the little, presumably, builder's plates on them. The steps are lined, the running plate is lined, the sanding pipes are painted red, the wheels have this beautiful SECR lining on them, and it's quite complex as well. You've got the lining in the centre, you've got the lining around the outside, which is black and red, and then you've got the lining on the actual spokes themselves. I mean, we're just talking about the wheels here, folks. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? The buffer beams are nicely painted, as you can see. We've got the running numbers on those. You've got the safety valve arrangement here, which is just all made of plastic, unfortunately, painted plastic, and the metalwork doesn't look particularly realistic, which contrasts massively with the electroplated dome, which has a very realistic shine to it, and I always love it when manufacturers do that. Not everybody does. Some people find that a little bit unrealistic and a bit too glossy, but to be honest, in real life, these, when polished up nicely, these would have shone like this, and I personally quite like to see that in the model. Okay, let's take a look at the level of detail then. So buffer beams, sadly we don't have the coupling hooks pre-fitted or indeed included in the accessories pack, so that is a slight omission. We do though have the pre-fitted vacuum pipe on the buffer beam, metal buffers which are sprung, look at that, very, very nice. Separately fitted lamp irons and a good wealth of detail on the running plate. The smokebox door has a very finely painted, separately fitted smokebox dart, and the hinges and the associated parts have all been separately painted as well. The handrails on the front of the boiler and also the smokebox, those appear to be metal and of course are separately fitted. You've got the little clack valves on the side of the boiler, which are very nicely moulded parts. And even between the frames there's a little bit of detail, not a huge amount. They certainly haven't gone to the trouble of modelling valve gear down there, which is a pity I think, but it's enough to catch the eye when the loco goes past, which is fine. More separately fitted parts, as you can see, at the base of the smoke box. Over on the other side, we've got a beautiful Westinghouse pump, or possibly condensing equipment. I always get the two mixed up. But as you can see, nicely detailed, fairly precise paintwork on it, nicely moulded piece. On top of the cab, you've got a separately fitted whistle, which is just plastic, unfortunately, and quite vulnerable up there, so you have to be careful not to catch it. The little vent on top of the cab is a separate part, and it's free to move up and down, so you can open it or shut it. I like to leave it open though, so it allows a little bit more light through onto the cab detail, which I will show you very shortly. The windows on the front of the cab have the window frames represented around them, and that looks lovely. The rear windows have this grille effect on them, which I believe is moulded into the glazing, but it's still a reasonably good effect. Underneath the cab, we've got this separately fitted pipework, which might even be part of the steps, possibly, but the effect is very strong, that's for sure. And I've been putting it off, I've been teasing you, but here is the cab detail. Now, they haven't gone to the degree of actually painting the gauges and such inside the cab, but I think considering how enclosed some of this detail is, the level of complexity here is quite impressive because there are lots of separately fitted parts. Many of the components are quite well painted, and then you've got a few separately fitted parts as well, such as the brake here, and it does look like the regulator is separately fitted as well. Up close, there's something very odd going on with the texture there. It looks like it's been spray painted from a suboptimal distance, perhaps, but yeah, from any sort of distance, that looks okay. The coal load looks like it's removable, doesn't it? It's not moving about too much, but I think you could get that out if you wanted to. Even so, the quality of the moulding on there is definitely not bad. And then around the back, you've got even more lining, more separately fitted lamp brackets, the vacuum pipe, more sprung buffers, and then of course we've got my NEM coupling that I fitted into here, but because it's NEM, you can fit anyone you want into it. So, I mean, yeah, when this cost me £97, I was really happy with the value for money here. It's a very complex livery, and the level of detail is absolutely tremendous. Quite honestly, if Hornby brought this back for £97, I would be surprised. And frankly, even if I ended up paying £140 to £150 for this today, I don't think I would be too disappointed, especially when you think about some of the other models that are out there on the market. You do have to consider the complexity of the livery here, and that is something that is missing from Hornby's current offerings of the H-Class, which I think make the value seem much less reasonable for those that they've announced. But yeah, at around £150 today, this model would be absolutely fine. However, of course, I have had quite a few mechanical issues with this one, so I certainly wouldn't want to pay £150 for a loco like that. So mixed feelings on the value for money, but I think we can all agree that back when this was £97, the value for money was quite astounding, really. And that's about £120 today, adjusting for inflation. Yeah, that's still outstanding. So let's move on. Let me show you the mechanism, and then we'll get it down onto the track and we'll do some performance testing. So there she is, Hornby's absolutely superb looking H-Class down onto the track. Now this is not a new model to me, and before I even started to film this review, I've dismantled this model many times before, so there was no need to start doing the performance testing before disassembly, so I'm going to show you the mechanism to start with. So the bogie wheels have electrical contacts on them, so they pick up power, and also the loco wheels also have pickups. So every single wheel on the locomotive, whether driven or undriven, have pickups on them, so that's great. The base keeper plate for the driving wheels is held in place by two screws, and if you remove those, you can see the base keeper plate is fully removable, so that's great for cleaning the pickups and accessing the axles. The electrical connection is done via spring-loaded contact, which is fantastic. You can see that the driving wheels fit into proper metal bearings, which is awesome, and only one of the axles is driven. The rest of the motion is transmitted via the coupling rods. Now, the chassis itself is relatively basic and bare. There's no flashy features on here, no pre-fitted speaker, no lights or anything, but it is die-cast, which is good quality, and it does have an 8-pin DCC socket on board. Now, this motor is the motor that I've put in here. Originally, the Hornby H-Class comes with a 5-pole skew-wound motor and a flywheel. This is a coreless motor that I've replaced the failed motor with, so clearly this is not the motor that you would expect to get from Hornby. So do bear that in mind when we look at the performance. When working properly, the original motors were good performers. They offered a good smooth crawl and everything, but at least my example did not last the test of time. And then in terms of gauge, we have 14.2 to 14.3 on each axle, which is a tiny bit below the standard, but usually that does mean some pretty good running. So, for the first time in many years, I'm proud to present this locomotive at long last working again. So, hopefully that's still the case. It was last time I tried it. Here we go. You ready? There we go. It's moving. And backwards. As you can see, nice and smooth. Now, there is a little bit of an issue with the rear bogie wheels because they have the wiper contacts on them, the pickups. Obviously, if those are pressing too hard against the wheels, then they will produce drag and stop those wheels from turning effectively. And you can kind of see that going on there. There was an issue with the bogie wheels when I first got this model. I can't remember what it was. It was either that the pickups were too tight and they were stopping the wheels from turning, or they were not adjusted tightly enough and the rear wheels weren't really picking up properly and the loco was cutting out. There was some sort of issue that needed rectification, but since I did that, I've never had a problem with it, except for the fact that the wheels are turning a little bit stiffly, but it would be my preference to have better electrical continuity than having all of the wheels turning smoothly. But yeah, you can adjust that to a degree. Right. Let me show you the 50% speed then, and I have to say this is performing largely similarly to the original H-Class that I had from Hornby with its old motor. If anything, maybe a little bit faster, but not massively so. So there we go, that's about 50 there. Let's do it again. That's 50. So if anything, quite quick, but let's see what the crawl is like. Ready? Let's see if we can crawl. Again, the original motor was a fine crawler. Let's see how the crawless one behaves. Easing up. As you can see, rather well. It's crawling rather well. In fact, it's hard to ask more, isn't it? Yeah, let's see if it can crawl in reverse. Let's pop us back. Ready? Sometimes locos are better in reverse. Oh, a bit slower maybe. Yeah, pretty good, isn't it, that? Bit more power? Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty good. And all in all, if not for the motor issues, the quality of the mechanism originally from Hornby was high. You've got all those quality features, nothing flashy or anything, but it does tick all of the boxes. So it's a shame that mine had issues straight out of the box. Not saying all of them did, but I know a number of them did because I've had comments and messages from you lot over the years with similar reports. So the tractive effort comes in at 0.19 newtons, which is not bad at all actually. That's more than the Bachmann 1P, the EFE02 and the Hornby M7. I assume that's because this has much better torque now than it used to, but even so, given that the weight is a little on the low side, not bad at all. So I've set up just some LBSC coaches, not really right in terms of livery, but they are kind of right in terms of era. So let's back this loco up, let's test the couplings, and let's see how she gets on with a small load. Not wanting to overdo this one for obvious reasons. Okay, as always, a good test of a loco's performance is how easily you can couple, or how gently perhaps. I think that was fairly gentle, wasn't it? Has it worked? Yeah, it does seem to have worked. And has the hook engaged properly? Yeah, both of the hooks have engaged. Right, let's have a nice running session then. Oh, I tell you what, it is so cool to have this loco up and running again. The number of times I've looked up at the shelf that this loco sat on and just wished that it would work. And now it does, look at that. And I'm going to be running a few other 044 tanks today. So on the middle line, we have what is probably my second favourite 044, the Hornby M7. Really good loco, that one. Quite heavy. Again, quite a bit larger as well than the H-Class, but still not as powerful. Okay, off it goes. And then on the inside line, we have what I think is my least favourite 044 tank. The very expensive and pretty naff EFE Class 04. This is, I think, was this 120 quid, something like that. Obviously now the Hornby H Class is much more expensive than that, but it is mechanically better, particularly if you don't get a faulty motor, and at least it does have the metal running plate and such, which this doesn't. This is much lighter, even without the flywheel in the H Class, and yeah, really naff puller. But yeah, the Hornby H Class value not as good as it used to be. So as you can see already, this loco is delivering a really nice controlled performance. And we'll keep an eye out around the curves to see if there are any issues with torque or slowing down. No, not at all. So for me, this is performing excellently now, possibly even better than it did originally, which is really good. So obviously the theme on the railway running is 044 tanks. But the theme in the sidings is a different theme, and there is an odd one out, with a couple of possible answers today, but if you get the one that I'm thinking of, I will pin you if you're first. So keep an eye out and let me know. As for the H-Class though, obviously you will need to take this review with a pinch of salt, because the loco reviewed here is not running the original Hornby hardware. The original Hornby motor did run excellently, from what I remember, but it did not last. So whether or not I can recommend this loco depends on whether or not those issues are going to persist with the new batch of H-Class. I think, assuming there are no problems with the new Hornby H-Class locos, I see no reason why I can't recommend them, because they're well detailed, good quality, and they do have good mechanisms. I do think the value for money on the latest models is quite a bit poorer than it used to be. I think that's quite objectively true, isn't it? Because you're paying a lot more money for the same model with a less complex livery. So yeah, definitely not a great value purchase these days, and also not in line with inflation, and not by a long way either. But still, as models in their own right, ignoring the price, they are decent, and as long as they work properly, I could totally recommend it to you. Let's have some ratings then on the beautiful Hornby SECR H-Class. The level of detail for me is a 4.5. It's very nearly perfect as far as I'm concerned. The livery, the number of separately fitted parts and small details is quite outstanding. The finish is pretty good. I think it's not the most wonderful in the world, but I think it's a reasonably satin quality finish. It does lose half a star because it doesn't include any screw-link couplings, which I think is a minor issue, but some locos do come with those and this one doesn't, and it's missing special features such as lights and that kind of thing. Otherwise though, yeah, great level of detail. The performance is a tricky one because I am of course rating the loco that we see here in front of us, but that's not exactly as the loco ran straight from the factory, so you might want to disregard this, but ultimately I can't find anything wrong with the way this loco is running now. It's picking up power reliably, the crawl is good and the high speed is good, the torque is decent now thanks to that quality coreless motor. It is a 5-star. Originally though, I didn't think it was so good. The performance was pretty good, but like I say, I'm sure I remember some sort of cutting out issue that had to be rectified by adjusting pickups, and then of course the motor failure issues. But yeah, with the coreless motor, mine's a 5-star performer I think, but that's not too useful to you, and I do apologise for that. The pulling power though is great, 14 coaches on straight and level track, or 0.19 newtons. That's higher than most 044s in the collection, and that's with me having reduced the weight by removing the flywheel. So yeah, great pulling power, good torque in the mechanism. Speaking of the mechanism, it's got to be a 5-star, hasn't it, even from the factory, because you've got super serviceability, you can access all of the parts of it really well. Proper bearings, pickups on all of the wheels, including the bogie wheels, 5-pole motor with a flywheel. Yeah, it's great. I'm not reflecting the fact that the motor failed here, I'm reflecting that instead in the quality, which would be a 5-star actually, if not for the issue with the motor. Now I say issue with the motor, that's what I thought it was. It could have been some other sort of design problem that was causing the failures. It could have been a component on the circuit board. It could have been that some of the gears were too close together and that was overloading the motor. I don't know, but for whatever that problem was, I've knocked off a couple of stars here. I do recognise that maybe not every H-Class would be like that, and I have no reason to believe that a new H-Class coming from Hornby today would have any of the same problems. I'm only talking here about my experience. Value for money then. Again, taking my experience into account, for £97 this would be a 5-star model. looking at the price of the H-Class today, which is £145.49 RRP, or around 141 to 142 at the retailers. Some of them are more. The Southern Black one is more expensive, but I'm taking the cheapest price I can find. That's not quite so good. I would give it 3-star. Still a great model with some good qualities, so it's not less than 3, but splitting the difference, I've given it 4-star. So overall, that's a good score, I think, of 8.25 out of 10. Lovely loco, good value, good quality. Yeah, not too much to fault really. Into the logbook we go then in 10th place, that's not bad, above the Walthers GP9 and below the Hornby L1 tank. Yes, overall, a really cracking loco from Hornby. Let's just hope those mechanical issues are a thing of the past now, like they are with mine. Well folks, thank you so much for watching this review. It has been lovely to revisit the H-Class, especially given the fact that it is running, and I am really pleased now that this loco can re-enter service in my fleet and continue to delight us all with its gorgeous performance. Yes, it was a crime and a shame that this loco was confined to the shelf, and it's now back where it belongs on the railway, so that's awesome. Well, please do let me know what you thought about this loco down in the comments, but I will say for now, thank you so much for watching. Have a very happy Christmas. I will see you soon for some more videos before the end of the year. But yeah, have a great time folks. Thank you for your support, thank you for watching, and I will see you all very soon. Alright, Merry Christmas folks, take care.